Around the World Lit Audio. The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. Week 9. The Finale. Chapters 25 to 32. Full narration script. Channel intro. Welcome to Around the World Lit Audio, the greatest novels ever written, from every corner of the world, in English. New chapter every week. Free to listen. Chapter recap. In week 8, Margarita stood at the top of the stairs of the great ball of Satan and greeted the damned through the night, murderers and poisoners and traitors and adulterers, each one by name, without rest, without sitting. When it ended, Woland asked, "What is your wish?" She asked for Frida, a woman she had met at the ball, who was tormented by a handkerchief. Woland granted Frida and told her the wish remained. She said, "I want the master." He was brought from the psychiatric hospital. The manuscript was produced, unburned, complete. Manuscripts do not burn. Woland looked at Moscow one last time, from a high place, and found it, as he found everything, interesting. Week 9. The Finale. Chapters 25 through 32. The Departure. Woland and his retinue left Moscow at sunset. They left the way they had come, suddenly, completely, without the gradual diminishment that ordinary departures involve. One moment they were in the city, and the next moment they were above it, moving through the air on horses that were not ordinary horses, with the specific speed of beings for whom distance is a category without the usual meaning. Behemoth and Koroviev rode ahead, performing one last act of chaotic generosity on the way out, setting fire to a fish store, not out of malice but out of the specific exuberance of supernatural beings, who have been in Moscow for a week, and are expressing their feelings about it, in the only register available to them. The fire department came. The fire was dealt with. Moscow absorbed it, as Moscow absorbed everything. As they rose above the city, the disguises fell away. This is one of the great moments of the novel, the moment when Koroviev, who has been throughout the book the long-faced check-suited translator with the cracked pince-nez, and the tone of permanent irony, becomes something else. He becomes a dark violet knight, riding in silence, his face still and his eyes full of the specific sadness of someone who made a very old joke, that was not taken in the right spirit, and has been paying for it since. Behemoth, the enormous cat who has spent the novel playing chess, and shooting at people and eating at buffets and being extremely pleased with himself, becomes a slim youth, a page, riding in the silence of his true form. Azazello becomes his true form, cold, impassive, the red of his single eye no longer comic but ancient. And Woland rides in black, on a black horse, at the head of the procession. Margarita and the master rode with them. They rode away from Moscow into the darkness and the moonlight, away from the city and its committees, and its housing associations and its literary organizations, and its informers and its bureaucrats, away from everything the novel had been satirizing, into something else, into the space that Bulgakov had been preparing throughout, the space that is not quite heaven, and not quite anywhere else, but is the place where what has been building finally arrives. Pilate's release. The Pilate story had been running through the novel from the beginning. It had begun on Patriarch's Pawns, where Woland told Berlioz and Ivan Bezdomny about a Roman procurator, who had a headache and questioned a wandering philosopher, and found him interesting and could not save him. It had continued through the Jerusalem chapters, Pilate and Yeshua, the interrogation, the conviction, the execution, Pilate's cowardice and his regret. Pilate had been sitting on a stone chair at the top of a mountain for 2,000 years. This was his punishment, not fire, not pain in any ordinary sense, but the specific punishment of a man who made the wrong choice and knows it, and cannot stop replaying it. He sat in the moonlight and the same conversation played through his head. What he had said, what Yeshua had said, what he had failed to say, what he had refused to do. For 2,000 years. With a dog at his feet, the master was told, "You can finish your novel now. Write the ending." He wrote it. He wrote, "Free. You are free. He is waiting for you." The moonlight road opened. Pilate walked down it. He walked with the specific quality of someone who has been still for a very long time and is now moving, not slowly, not stumbling, but with the directness of a man who knows where he is going, and has been waiting to go there for 2,000 years. The dog ran beside him. He walked toward the figure at the end of the road, toward Yeshua, toward the conversation that had been interrupted, toward the thing that had not been finished, and was now going to be finished in the place where unfinished things go. He was free. What the master and Margarita received. Woland spoke to the master. He said, "You will not go to the light. You have not earned the light, but you have earned peace." This is one of the theological distinctions of the novel, the distinction between the light that is the domain of the divine, and the peace that is given to those who have lived and suffered and created, and loved without the specific qualities that the light requires. The master had written a novel about Pontius Pilate. He had suffered for it. He had loved Margarita and been loved by her. He had not been a saint. He had been a man, a specific, flawed, gifted, exhausted man, who had done the best he could with what he had. He received peace. They were given a house, not a palace, not El Dorado, but a quiet house with a garden, and candles and the specific quality of a place that is exactly what is needed. The house had been waiting. It had the feel of a place that had always been there, that had been arranged for this specific purpose, that contained in its dimensions, and its light exactly the right amount of space, for two people who had been through a great deal and needed, more than anything, somewhere quiet. The master sat at the window. Margarita sat beside him. He said, "Do you hear that silence?" She said, "Yes." He said, "I have been wanting this for a long time." She said, "I know." He began to think about what he would write next. This was the sign that the peace was real, not the absence of desire but the return of creative desire, the specific feeling of a writer who has not been able to write and finds, in the quiet of the house with the garden and the candles, that the writing is possible again. He would write something. He did not know what yet. He sat at the window. Margarita sat beside him. The candles burned. The last of Ivan Nikolaevich Bezdomny had been changed by everything that had happened. He had started the novel as a poet, a Soviet poet, writing ideologically correct verse that he privately knew was not good, with the specific combination of cynicism and compliance that the Soviet literary world required. He had been on Patriarch's pawns, when Berlioz was killed and had chased Woland and his retinue through Moscow and had ended up in the psychiatric hospital, and had met the master and had heard the story of Pilate. He was no longer a poet. He had understood, in the psychiatric hospital, that the verse he had been writing was not good and should not be continued, which is a more important understanding than it sounds. The understanding that what you are doing is not worth doing is one of the more difficult things a person can arrive at, and arriving at it is a form of progress even when it does not feel like one. He became a historian. He taught at the institute. He lived an ordinary life with the specific quality of someone who has encountered the extraordinary and has been permanently changed by it, without being destroyed by it. Once a year, on the night of the full moon, something happened to him. He could not sleep on those nights. An anxiety came over him, not an ordinary anxiety, not the anxiety of daily life, but something larger and older, something connected to what he had seen and heard and experienced in the days when Woland was in Moscow and the world was less stable than it usually presented itself as being. On those nights he walked. He walked to the river. He sat, and in the moonlight on the water he saw things. He saw the execution in Jerusalem. He saw Pilate on his stone chair. He saw the moonlight road opening, and Pilate walking down it. He saw the master and Margarita in their quiet house. Then the vision passed and he walked home and slept, and in the morning he was a historian again, teaching at the institute, living his ordinary life. But once a year the moonlight came and he remembered everything. Series close. You have reached the end of The Master and Margarita, by Mikhail Bulgakov. Written in secret, revised across 12 years. Hidden in the walls of Bulgakov's apartment during the terror, when keeping such a manuscript was not a neutral act. He died in 1940, still revising. His widow Yelena preserved the manuscript, waited 26 years, and in 1966, 6 years after Stalin was dead, and the thaw had made it possible, the novel was published in a censored version in a Soviet literary magazine. The full text appeared in the West in 1967. The complete Russian text was not published in the Soviet Union until 1973. What Bulgakov argued, through Woland and the Master and Margarita and Pilate and Ivan in Moscow and Jerusalem, is something about the persistence of truth. The committees of the Soviet literary world could decide that God did not exist, and that Pilate was a legend and that certain kinds of writing were not permitted. They could make people disappear. They could make manuscripts disappear, or try to. But manuscripts do not burn. What is true does not stop being true because the institutions of power decide to say otherwise. The truth sits and waits, the way Pilate sat on his mountain, the way the manuscript sat in the wall, the way Bulgakov's widow waited 26 years. And eventually the moonlight road opens. Thank you for listening to The Master and Margarita on Around the World Lit Audio. Subscribe so you never miss a chapter. A new episode arrives every week.